of Revelation, pop quiz. Where is it?
At the end.
Oh, y'all good. Okay, that was it.
That's the only test I passed.
This is one of those books. When you think of the book, does anything come to mind? Just real quick. Revelation.
Well, the churches,
The seven churches.
That-
Well, what's your reaction, though? You have a reaction?
I grew up listening to that you were going straight to hell if you didn't do everything that this book said.
Okay, because of Revelation?
Yeah, I mean, that was preached a lot, but I mean
Okay.
everything else, but
Right.
this is what has stuck out in my mind.
So fear, maybe?
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else?
Confusion.
Confusion. Yeah, there's a lot of things about it that's pretty weird.
Being an English major, I've always gotten caught up in the symbolism.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that maybe the streets aren't gold, but that was the best way they could describe it.
Easy to do. Easy to do. Can I request that we close that door? Squirrel? I keep hearing sound, Let me point out a couple of odd things about Revelation. I'm hoping we're going to demystify it a little bit. I'm hoping it's going to make a little more sense why we're confused, okay, if that makes any sense. And then I kind of want to break it down into, well, what is actually in this for me? Can I get anything out of this other than going, God, please don't let me look at this book? It's the book of Revelation. It's not Revelations, it's one revelation. And we often say it the other way. What is it a revelation of? Anybody know? It's the revelation of
Jesus Christ.
Thank you. It's almost like she knows something. It's the revelation of Jesus Christ as made to John. It's not the revelation of end times or anything like that. It's the revelation of Jesus Christ. So keep that in mind as we talk, okay? The book was written about 95 AD, about the time the century was going to turn, so that tells you it's been a while. It's been a good, good 60 years after Jesus has died and been raised. And it was the last book to be accepted as part of the canon, part of the accepted group of the Bible. And still to this day, a lot of the Eastern churches don't include it. And even as late as 330, they said, well, we both accepted and rejected at the same time. And what that means is we acknowledge it, we're not exactly sure what to make of it, kind of. This is supposed to be a vision, okay, a vision. I call a vision kind of an awake dream where something is revealed to you by something other than just your own meandering thoughts. To John, who was on Patmos, and that's an island. Anybody know what he was doing there?
He was arrested, wasn't he in prison?
Well, he had been in prison too. He had this amazing capacity of having odd things happen to him. This vision came, and I love to tell the story, but it came after they tried to kill him. They boiled him in oil and left him for dead. No wonder he's having weird dreams. But I don't think that's the reason for the whole thing. But anyway, what he is doing in this book is actually got an audience, and the audience is what is called the seven churches. And those were all the churches in Western Asia Minor. And you've heard of some of them, you've heard of some of the names, and we'll kind of hit some of them. So anyway, that's the original recipients. So this is a message to certain people about the revelation of Jesus Christ. Okay? So far there's nothing scary, but we haven't gotten in there yet. John may or may not have been the same John that wrote the other John books. Most people think it was. A few scholars say not necessarily. The one really cool connection is whoever wrote 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, wrote the first book of John, and this referred to Jesus Christ as being the Word. And that's one parallel that's really consistent and really beautiful. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and so on. So, when he writes this to the churches, he's talking to them through an angel who is talking to him in a vision. And he's basically giving them a state of their spiritual being. Here's some things you've done well. Here's some things not so good, or in some cases, this ain't good. Okay? Now here's what you need to do from there, and if you do these things, here are the rewards and the good stuff that's going to happen. That's the nature of the book. Now that's the easiest to see when he's actually talking to the churches, and we'll do a quick look at that. Now, another thing in this book is they are encouraging them to move on. They are encouraging them to keep their eyes on Jesus as Christ and to avoid the type of paganism that was really popular in that day, which had to do with Rome and the emperor and all that. It's like, don't get all caught up in that guy. You know, he was not a good guy, and even if he was, that's the wrong way to be looking. So there are a lot of people that that's what the entire book is about. It just depends on who you ask. So that's kind of the history. Anybody ever heard of apocalyptic literature? This is it. You know any other book in the Bible that does that?
Ezekiel?
Ezekiel has some. Daniel has some. Do you know what it means? I mean, you kind of do, but it's hard to say. It was really typical in first century Christianity. But basically, it's when people take a view of the world is changing, here's what's happening, this is a big deal. Now, today in our world, we think of that as, oh my God, the world's coming to an end. Well, that's not necessarily what they thought back then. And so there's a lot of Jewish apocalyptic literature, but the first century Christians wrote a lot of it. This was a really common way to write, even though we don't see a lot of it. And I kind of equate that today. I think of a few odd genres that we have. One is like the Hunger Games, or Divergent, those things. Very similar. They're kind of a fantasy thing. They have some basis in reality. They're about survival. They're about overcoming the odds and the victory and defeat and just all this wild stuff, but it's put into a fantasy setting. Well, it's very similar to Revelation or vampire stuff. What do you think is the draw about vampire stories? I mean, that's really big now. Do you see any bizarre spiritual correlations with vampire stuff? Let's really stretch you. Okay? No, you don't. Okay, here's some being that's sort of like kind of eternal, with a weird kind of power, and you throw in a little passion, a little this, but they've also got a little weakness. Can you see why people are attracted to that? I mean, it kind of is how they feel. They feel a little eternal. At the same time, they feel really mortal. So this would be a norm for us. Now, can you imagine shifting forward about 2,000 years, maybe vampires have not been heard of, and they're reading this stuff and going, what? I think we're having the same reaction to Revelation. I also liken this to dreams. Do you have weird dreams, ever? Do you do things in your dreams you would never do? Yeah. And some of it's very symbolic. You might be riding on a bicycle, next thing you know, you're flying through the air, right? Or you end up sleeping with somebody you're related to. Who you would never do that with, or something. I mean, strange things happen in our dreams.
She just said that.
I just said that.
She did not.
But let me ask you a question. Is there anybody here who has not had that happen in your dream? Just raise your hand now. See, don't you?
Sleeping with a brother.
Somebody you're not supposed to. You've never.
Not a family member.
Well, well, you know, it's like, oh my God, I kissed my sister. You get dreams do weird things. And it's not really a reflection of what's truly in your brain. But I say that because if that happens to you, don't freak out. It happens to everybody. Weird stuff happens. Or you're talking to your pet, and your pet is actually talking back, and not just in your mind and in that telepathic way. They're telling you, I mean, things happen in your dreams. Well, visions are like dreams. It takes your logical mind out of the middle so that there's a free flow of creativity. So when you hear this stuff, kind of let it be like you do your dreams. It's not really figure out. So as we go into this sort of mystical stuff where things fly and come out of the ocean with a certain number of heads and eyes and whatever, may the odds be ever in your favor. And here we go. So this revelation of Jesus Christ is about Jesus not in the days when he was here on earth so much, but he's risen and he's glorified. And they're reminding us of him and moving toward that place. There are four really basic approaches to Revelation and how people interpret it. This will tell you why we're so confused, okay? I'm going to touch on these, and you don't have to remember them or anything like that, but you'll go, oh yeah, I've heard of that. Well, the first one, the fancy word is prost. And the basic things is all those events are about the 1st century AD. It all applies to the Roman Empire. The bad guy is Nero. All the symbols are related to all that stuff. So number one is 1st century Rome. That was a common thing for the Christians of that day to think that it was. Okay, that was usually their take. The other one is called historist. This is an early Protestant thing. Most of the early Protestant thought this. They think it's this panoramic view of the church from that 1st century AD all the way through to the present, or in some cases until the end of time. So they're seeing it as symbolic of church history and all the brouhaha that happens with the church and people and God. And they also see a lot of the symbolism as also being about like invaders of the Roman Empire, especially when they were the barbarians or the heathens. So there's still this good versus evil component to it. A lot of the Roman Catholic Church is in there. For the people that interpret it this way, they see the rising of the church and whatever is being about the Roman Catholic Church. In some cases, they call that a good thing. In some cases, they call that a bad thing. It just depends on what they think about the greater Roman Catholic Church. Or other faiths that come up, some of which are false. Most of the time when you hear about that great city Babylon, or that woman, that bad woman, they're talking about false religion. So whatever somebody's definition of false religion is, things that aren't pure, good, godly religion, that would be like Babylon. That's a normal thing to think. So that's the other very common thing. So that was the normal kind of Christian-esque thing for years and years and years and years and almost hundreds of years. The next one is called the idealist. It's basically, don't sweat it, everything's symbolic. Nothing's meant to be literal. It's all about allegory. It's not history. It's not stuff that happened. It's not foretelling the future. It's just symbolic. And it's supposed to be about, you know, the normal struggles of good and evil and that cosmic thing that happens. So that's all that is. But the stories have spiritual truth. So they have meaning. And last but not least, the one that we're used to, and the newest one, it's called futurist, where people believe this is prophecy, and some of it is yet to come. Most people say it's like from chapter 6 on. It's still coming, it's going to happen. Some of it might be literal, some of it might be symbolic. Well, that's what the later time evangelical Christians think. It's a new way of thinking about it.
The Left Behind series.
The Left Behind series, all that. You didn't notice any of that in those other 3 things at all. But this is what we hear about a lot. So kind of weigh that as you think about it. So far, do you recognize maybe what you heard growing up or in another church in any of those? Any of them really strong in one way or another?
Futuristic.
Good. Futuristic? Everybody did? Okay, see now I got the first one. I got the more Protestantist view growing up, but I've heard a lot of the futuristic one. Now what happens in this futuristic one also, they consider that the symbols, the peoples, the weird thing that happen are actual people in the world or forces in the world. Okay? That was not necessarily true of the other ones, or they reflected somebody, but they weren't the literal person. That includes an idea of a literal millennium. You've heard this thing about a millennium, and Christ will reign for 1,000 years, for all that stuff. Okay. This is new. This is a new notion. Yeah, the words are in there, but to interpret it that literally is kind of new. Also kind of new on the scene is what we call the rapture. Because while there are words that talk about things like that in there, it wasn't a huge teaching until about 1836, if you can imagine. What's the one thing we were taught that scares the bejesus out of us all the time? The rapture. You better be ready, right? So a little historical view, it's kind of a new thing. Doesn't make it wrong, but it's kind of new. Now, when you have all that, you have some people that think, well, if there's a rapture, it happens before there's this great tribulation. Some people say, oh, no, it happens after the great tribulation. And someone goes, no, some of us go before, some of us go during, some of us go after, and, okay, is it any wonder we're confused? This is where you hear millennialists, post-millennialists, pre-millennialists, all this crazy stuff that confuses us. And then there's a subset of this whole group that does believe that it's futuristic, mostly, who are called amillennialists. And what they believe is they don't believe in a literal millennium. So they believe this stuff is in the future, but it's kind of symbolic yet at the same time. Okay? Now, does anybody fit neatly into any one package? If so, please let me know, because it sounds like you've made up your mind, and I'd be very happy. So a lot of this is very confusing. No wonder we're confused. So again, just real quick, it's first century, Roman Empire, or it's the whole church history, or it's all symbolic, or it's stuff that kind of happened, but it's still yet to come. Those are the four big choices. Now, whichever one you come from a mindset of will frame absolutely everything you think about what you read. Everything. If you take a different viewpoint than the one you were taught, what you're going to get out of reading the scripture is going to be totally different. This is why this book is so scary. Plus, the symbolism that they use is weird for us, and I find it pretty scary. Everybody totally confused yet? Is your mind made up? Are we good? Okay. So, if we think that everything is literal in this book, please shoot me now. Because I don't want to go through that. And I think that's what most of us are thinking. I don't want to see beasts and crazy stuff. I mean, it's hard enough just to go to work or whatever. You know, that's not crazy for me. So there's a lot of symbols. Some things tend to mean the same thing across the board. Some things don't. I'm going to hit a couple of them just because you're probably going, well, what about? What about? And I'm going to tell you what's kind of the common thought, but it doesn't mean it's right. Okay? I don't even know that I agree with it. But a couple quick things. Okay, there's two beasts. You know there's a beast. Did you know there were two? One rises up from the sea, and his theme is blasphemy. And that's usually the one they connect with being the Antichrist when they use that. But did you know the word Antichrist isn't in Revelation? People are making the connection. Okay? And the second one rises up from the earth and is a false prophet. Okay? So, does anybody have any overarching thought about what you've heard of an Antichrist?
Oh, for years they've tried to assign it to different people.
Yeah.
In fact, just this week, a friend of mine said her partner thought Bloomberg was the Antichrist.
Okay. And I've seen one that said Trump was.
Trump,
I know
yeah.
people that believe that Obama was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And before, who was the guy with Nixon that was the German guy that was like Secretary of State?
Yeah.
Kissinger?
Kissinger, yeah. When I taught at Christian school, they had it all worked out by his names, how the letters all worked into 666, so he could be the Antichrist.
Well, while I'm saying this next time, would somebody who's willing to read one verse look up for me 1 John 2:18. So what is an Antichrist? Well, we get this idea of this big, ghastly, but if you think about what the word actually means, it's just something that opposes Christ. Okay? We have many little antichrists in our own brain sometimes. It's not a big hairy monster, but there are many different definitions. But it opposes God and often persecutes the saints. All right? Is that ringing a bell for anybody? Sounds like an adversarial situation. Who can read for me 1 John 2:18? Nice and loud.
Children, time is just about up. You heard that Antichrist is coming? Well, they're all over the place. Antichrist everywhere you look. That's how we know that we're close to the end.
Thank you. Even now there are many antichrists. It's not one big scary thing. There are many things that oppose Christ. Okay? So don't let the word antichrist freak you out. They've always been here. They've always been here. It's not a big scary. So you won't see Antichrist as the thing written, although you do see the beast in Revelation. The mark of the beast. Where's the mark of the beast? Why would it be on your forehead? What the heck could that mean?
So that everybody can see what you are.
And what do you do with this?
Think.
You think. Yeah. It's the imprint of you think. Everybody can see it, you think it, okay? And when they have the mark of Christ later, guess where it shows up? Same place. Okay. What is the mark of the beast? What is it? Is it a tattoo of a beautiful lily or anything numbers you avoid.
Oh,
666, that's what you hear. You know what's really funny? You're gonna love this. This just goes to show you how much what we're taught gets ingrained. The original, the earliest manuscripts, the 20 earliest ones, it's not 666, it's 616. And they can't decide if it got mistranslated or what, but it's one or the other. So before you wig out about 666, it's not that cut and dry. Are we a little more relaxed yet? Okay. I have 3 friends who are a little bit troublemakers, and they all had that tattoo on their legs. Yeah, a little strange, a little strange. But anyway, Antichrist is one that opposes Christ. All the numbers mean something. A lot of times you get that the 40 days and 40 nights means a complete number of time. 7 is like a spiritual number. It means complete in a spiritual way. 6 is the number of man, or mankind, humankind. So 666, all the 6s. It's about humanness too. 5 is a number for grace. It's all kind of numbers, all kind of numbers. 12. 12 disciples, 12 tribes, 12 is. 12 is about the government of God. So all these numbers, when they pop up, they have a reason. And sometimes if you know what the number's about, it makes sense. Other things are exactly as you would think, just kind of like in your dreams. You know, there's like 10 eyes on this one thing. What do you do with your eyes?
Look.
You see? Yeah. And others see into you. So if a strange thing pops up with a lot of eyes, it can see everywhere. Maybe that's all, maybe it's that simple, who knows. What about brass? His feet were like brass. That's judgment. But what judgment usually means is justice. See, we think of judgment as being negative, but usually it's actually justice. And so before we go getting too worried about that too, fire. There's going to be fire. Here's the thing about fire. In reality and in Revelation, fire purifies. It doesn't burn anything up. Did you ever notice that? Nothing is destroyed by fire, it's purified. And when they talk about like sulfur or fire and brimstone, it purifies, it clarifies, it whatever. It's not meant to destroy, it's meant to preserve and make something better. But we get this, we go so physical in the West that it's hard for us to do that type of thing. So there's a whole lot of stuff. The candlesticks. What do candlesticks do? There's 7 candlesticks. What?
They illuminate.
They illuminate. They hold the light, don't they? Well, sometimes Revelation is so simple, believe it or not, it will tell you what these things are after you quit reading and panicking. In this case, the 7 candlesticks are the 7 churches. So when they rise up, they're talking about the 7 churches. That wasn't scary at all. So we're going to go to Revelation. We're going to skip around a lot. You know how we've learned from Reverend Cathy that any story in the Bible is about us, and all those people are us, and we might be every one of those people in that story at any given time. I think the same thing can be true of the churches. These churches describe where we might be found in a spiritual place. Times when we're in a good place, a not great place, what we may have done right or not so well. Or even our local church, perhaps even the corporate church as a whole. So as we think about the church, just don't think, oh yeah, those guys, they did that stuff. Because it's right here, okay? So the first sentence, here we go. Revelation. The revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave him to show his servants what must soon take place. And so on. So again, the revelation of Jesus Christ. Let's move to chapter 2. I'm going to skip a lot because there's not a lot of time to read, but they're talking to the churches now. Talking to this first church, 2, verse 2. He says, I know your works. I know the stuff that you've done. I know how you've been tested. I know how you've dealt with people that didn't do the right thing, and on and on and on and on. And by the time you get to verse 4, it says, but I have this against you. You've abandoned the love you had at first. You know, you're doing all this stuff. Where's the love? And then it says, repent and do the works you did first. It's about the love. Go back to the love. Now look at verse 7. Let anyone who has an ear hear what the Spirit is saying to the church as. That's plural. So they're talking to all the churches while talking to the one church. And it says, to everyone who conquers, I will give permission to eat from the tree of life that is in the paradise of God. What a nice message for this church. I see what you're doing. You're working so hard. Put the love back in. It's going to be great. I mean, that's way oversimplified, but that's the message. How often do we find ourselves in that situation? I'm doing too much of it. I'm not doing it out of love. I'm doing it because I'm supposed to, whatever. Can you find yourself in that? I would highly recommend that you go and you look at each of these churches. It's really just like 3 or 4 chapters. But there's a few of them. And then skipping over, they're talking about, again, he says to another church, to everybody who conquers, I will give some of the hidden manna. What would you imagine that is? Hidden manna. What is manna?
Food,
Food.
nourishment.
So what would hidden manna be? What do you think? Possibilities?
I know a lot of times if you're reading scripture, you know, or reading anything really, you'll read it 50 times, and then on time 51, something will click, and you'll see something you didn't see before.
Hidden food. Food you don't see. It might not be physical food. Maybe it's some type of spiritual food. And then when we jump down in that same chapter to verse 20, it's the second part. This is really cool. To the one who conquers, I will also give the morning star. Everybody know what the morning star is? Symbolic of usually. It's Christ. To be given Christ, what a gift. What a gift. Eating that hidden manna helps you find that Christ. Now it gets a little more serious for the church at Sardis in chapter 3, and he says, I know your works. You have a name of being alive, but you are dead. Have you ever been to that church? Wake up and strengthen what remains and is on the point of death. Because I haven't found your works perfect in the eyes of God. So they're saying, wake up. Even though you're dead, just wake up. And what happens after that? Good stuff. Again. Then they have Philadelphia. We've heard of that. We even named one of our cities. If you conquer, I'll make you a pillar in the temple of God. And you'll never go out of it. And I'll write on you the name of my God. Can you imagine having the name of God written on you? Just symbolically what that must mean. And then there's Laodicea. Did I pronounce that right?
I always call it Laodicea.
Yeah, whatever it is. This is the favorite. We all know this one. I know your works. You're neither cold nor hot. What are they? Lukewarm. So I'm going to spit you out of my mouth. That sounds awful. It's like, oh, that just really is the end. But it's not.
The message says you're stale and stagnant.
Yes. Stale and stagnant. Thank you. So when you get to this, now check out verse 20. I wish you were cold or hot. That's what it says, but verse 20. See if you've heard this before. Listen, I stand at the door and knock. We've always heard that in another context, haven't we? I'm standing at the door and knocking. If you'll hear my voice and open it up, we'll come in and we'll dine together. That's to the lukewarm people. Even though you're lukewarm and I'm going, I'm knocking. I'm still knocking. So come in, let me do this stuff. And to who conquers, you'll be with me on my throne. Conquers what? Being lukewarm sounds like a real simple, whatever you mean. So even though they always seems to be something not going too well, it's like, wake up, listen, turn, change, go back to whatever and do. And that's true for all 7 of the churches. It's really a neat thing. So jumping ahead past all these churches and all the things that we'll recognize as a part of real life, I'm going ahead to chapter 5. Things are still happening. Strange creatures have yet to pop up and do odd things. But even then, they're talking about the scroll and the lamb. Anybody got an idea what the lamb is?
Jesus.
Would be Christ who sacrificed, yeah. Scrolls would have words on them, right? So verse 13, then I heard every creature in heaven and on earth. Let me say it again. Every creature on heaven and on earth, and under the earth and in the sea, and all that's in them, singing to the one seated on the throne, to the Lamb, be blessing and honor and glory and might forever and ever. Every being sang that. Every being. You know that every knee shall bow, every tongue confess. Every single one sang it. When you go over to chapter 7, and we get the 144,000 that are sealed, whatever that means. Did you know the Jehovah's Witnesses believe it is only 144,000, literally. And if you're not in the top 144,000, you didn't make it. But let's look at this here at verse 9. It says, after this I looked, and there was a great multitude that no one could count, from every nation, from all tribes, and peoples and languages, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, robed in white, with palm branches in their hands, and they cried out in a loud voice, saying, salvation belongs to our God, who is seated on the throne, and to the Lamb. Well, it sounds to me like they're not sweating their position any. It sounds really like a beautiful thing. When you go over to 16, here's some words you've heard before. They will hunger and thirst no more. The sun will scorch them. The Lamb will be at the center of the throne and will be their shepherd. He'll guide them to the springs of water of life, and God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. How long have we looked forward to that? Most of us have hung on to that for a long time. So there is still a lot of weird things happening. There are woes going back and forth. There are trumpets sounding. What is a trumpet? What do you think of when you think of a trumpet? What does a trumpet do? Huh?
Fanfare.
It's a fanfare. It's a word. It's an announcement. It's a. So often a trumpet means a word, or paying attention to something. So when all these things happen, keep in mind it's just saying, hey, something is going on here. Now when we get to the seventh trumpet, that's in chapter 11, verse 15. Then the seventh angel blew his trumpet, and there were loud voices in heaven saying, the kingdom of this world has become the kingdom of our Lord and of his Messiah, and he will reign forever and ever. So at some point, the kingdoms of this world belong to God. Stuff may be crazy, stuff may be going on, but there's a plan for it to all come together. And then later in verse 12, it says, the accuser of our brethren has been thrown down. He had accused them day and night, but they have conquered him by the blood of the Lamb, the work that Christ did, and by the word of their testimony. Wow. No swords, but it was the work that Jesus did, and then our word that Jesus had done. Amazing stuff in here. Amazing. Then there's more crazy stuff. There's plagues. There's wild things that happen. You can get into a lot of the symbolism if you want. It's really easy to look some of this up. If you think of it in terms of what we said people come from, it kind of, in a way, becomes obvious once you stop and think about it. Talking about Babylon, sometimes referred to as the Great Whore, right? Babylon, the false religion. Okay. Chapter 17, going down to something like 6 and change. Oh, 7. The angel said to me, why are you so amazed? I'll tell you the mystery of the woman and of the beast with the 7 heads and the 10 horns that carries her. Okay? Finally, we're going to get some clarity here. The beast that you saw, I'm getting dizzy now, was, and is not, and is about to ascend from the bottomless pit and go to destruction. Everybody perfectly clear now? Good? Good. Okay, what the heck does that mean? It was and is not, but now is gonna, okay? Oh good, y'all clear. All right, yeah, then we move on. What I would say about that actually is, the beasts exists. But the beast's reality is based on you believing in the beast's reality. Now that's my interpretation, you have to understand, okay? That's me. And yet, it's going to ascend from a bottomless pit and be destroyed. Once you understand that the beast that is only has the power that you give it, it gets destroyed. That's my personal take. Go and read somebody else's take and see what you think. But that's my take. Then all sorts of wonderful things happen. All the bad things seem to be being separated out from the good things. The bad beings separated out from good beings. Now here's where it gets really cool. This is the part where there's a lot of freedom, because a lot of times we worry that people we know are being left out of this. As we go to Revelation 18:21, mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone and threw it into the sea, saying, with such violence, Babylon, for that false religion, the great city will be thrown down and will be found no more. How great would it be if false religion were gone? If the religion that put people down for whatever reason was not in place. If the things that held people in oppression were not there. What a wonderful thing. And that's what this is saying. At some point in time, it's going to be gone, because God's going to clear things up. God will clear things up. We may not see it on this earth here quite the way we would like to, but it will happen somehow, some way. And so as we go into chapter 20, you heard of the great white throne judgment? With fear and trembling, are you shaking yet? Well, it sounds scary, but when you think of the color white, it's about purity, it's about clarity. So let's look at this at verse 11. I saw a great white throne and the one who sat on it. The earth and the heaven fled from his presence, and no place was found for them. Now check this out. And I saw the dead, great and small, standing before the throne, and books were opened. And another book was opened, the book of life. And the dead were judged according to their works. Okay, so anybody all dead, great and small, are being judged according to their works right here. It's kind of what it sounds like. As it was recorded in the books. And then, after that, it says, and the sea gave up the dead that were in it. Death and Hades, or hell, gave up the dead that were in them, and all were judged according to what they had done. Wait a minute. Does that match anything you heard growing up? I'm just going to let you think about that. Then death and Hades were thrown into the lake of fire. This is the second death. Is that a little different than what you usually hear? A little different. But I'll read it through a little bit. It's very, very interesting. Now, I will tell you that as you go on and read, there's some other things that may sound a little bit scary, but there's a word that's fairly poorly translated. And it came from the King Jimmy being poorly translated. When it talks about the lake of fire, and it says, anyone whose name was not found written in the book of life was thrown into the lake of fire. What you have to understand is two things. One, the only people left there now are there because their name is in the book. And the word anyone whose name, they're saying anything whose nature is not found in the book of life. That was what was thrown into the lake of fire. It's not the people thrown into the lake of fire. It's the nature of what is not like God is thrown into the lake of fire. That's why nothing can corrupt the kingdom of God. It's not about the people. It's about the nature of things that were not good. It was about the nature of things that were corruptible. And yet it's kind of scary. Coming toward the end, 21, verse 22. I saw no temple in the city, for its temple is the Lord God Almighty and the Lamb. And the city has no need of sun or moon to shine on it, because the glory of God is its light, and its lamp is the Lamb. The nations will walk by its light, and the kings of the earth will bring their glory into it. Its gates will never be shut by day, and there will be no night there. People will bring into it the glory and the honor of the nations, but nothing unclean will enter it, and so forth and so on. Chapter 22, the angel shows a river of life flowing from the throne of God through the middle of the street of the city. Now, I'm going to blow your mind with something else. It's not streets of gold, plural. There's one street. It's a street of gold. But with the songs, always say streets. So that might mean something. If we all live on one street, that makes us truly neighbors. What else that might mean is up to you. But the river of life flowed through the middle of the street of the city. Now this is fascinating. On either side of the river is the tree of life. Doesn't that mean both sides? On both sides of the river is the tree of life. With its 12 kinds of fruit, and the leaves are for the healing of the nations. So things are still being healed at this point. Nothing accursed will be found there anymore, but the Lamb of God, the throne of God, and the Lamb will be on it, and his servants will worship him. They will see his face, and his name will be on their foreheads. Yay! And so we're going to end at verse 17. And the Spirit and the bride say, come. Let anyone who hears say, come. Let anyone who wishes take the water of life as a gift. So to me, if you ask about overarching principles of the book, no matter which of the categories you fall into, out of, and over and through, where you're coming to interpret it, the good guys win. And the good guys win because God wins, because God can't fail. And there's always an invitation to all people at every step in the way. Whether you're in that church that's doing great, doing poorly, whatever, there's always this invitation to come and dine, to do better, to conquer, and to reap the rewards and the benefits earlier and earlier and earlier. But eventually everybody gets added into this to where we're kind of all on a street. Now, I don't know that that's a literal street. I kind of don't think it is. If you think it is, that's okay. To me, it doesn't matter. The whole notion is goodness is there. The place is lit up by God. The people are one people, even though they are different nations, different languages, different whatevers. There's nothing bad left anymore at this point. Anything that can corrupt, that causes grief, that causes sadness, has gone. It's no longer there. Anything that's not like God does not exist anymore. So there's nothing there but joy and wholeness. So whether this is all symbolic, partly symbolic and literal, whether there's a millennium, whether or not there's a rapture, whatever, it's all going to be okay in the end. And I guess you have to ask yourself, how much comfort does it give me to decide, well, I'm going to believe this is this, 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 and this. If that really helps you, go ahead. The worst that can happen is you're wrong. I plan on being wrong about a few things. I've done it once or twice in the past. Don't give me any references over here.
Being quiet.
But anyway, does that help a little bit with this book? I mean, there's still a lot of weird stuff in there, and you can't possibly go through it in a novel. But if you think about it as a weird dream after you ate chocolate and had a weird medication, it makes more sense. And I don't mean to make too much light of it, because I really think that it is divinely inspired. And when you can get that type of beauty out of horses coming up and four guys coming up and candlesticks and eyes and heads and all that crazy stuff, you know, that's really something. It's really an amazing book. But do, if you get a chance, go back and read through the churches part, because you will go, oh yeah, I've been there doing that. Oh, that was last week. Oh, I did that 3 years ago. That was not a good place. Yeah, you'll find yourself there. It's good. It's very short. Is there anything that hangs out that anybody would like to ask that we can throw around? What do you think about this, that, or the other? And we can do that. Anything still sounds scary that we mystify a little bit or anything? All right. Well, you think someone holler. Seriously, holler. Because I think a lot of times when we get together and talk about these things, it just really does help. Helps it settle and helps make it make more sense. And thank you for listening to the Crazy Ramblings. Let's pray. And loving God, thank you for a time to sit back and think, to consider, to reconsider, maybe even to leave with more questions than we had when we came in. But we thank you that you're there. We thank you that your touch, your presence is on our lives to lead us and guide us. Because the main thing is that you lead us and guide us into love. Anything else is just details. And we thank you. In Jesus' name, amen.